Does it say recording? There we go. You are recording. All right. We are officially recording for posterity. This is meeting number 3 of the Heights, formerly known as Hillcrest, Sustainability Work Group on Friday, March 25th at 2 p.m. Thank you all for joining us. And before we get started on just checking in on any insight, any nuggets that people picked up as they were doing their homework these last couple of weeks here, I'm going to share some stuff with you that you may have seen because it did attract a bit of attention this last week. And so, 1 second here. So you all heard that the site has a new name called The Heights. We'd been working for a few months on a number of different things, which were the new name, which was selected in a very democratized online process. There was a neighborhood committee of residents that helped us sort through what was going on online and put some names forward, which were then voted on online. And ultimately, we used Andrea used some social media micro-targeting tools to target that voting activity within a mile radius of the site. So we think we got a pretty good representation of folks who live around there voting. We came up with the Heights. That was dropped last Monday, along with half a dozen photorealistic renderings, which we'll run through real quick here. We did make the front page of Finance and Commerce, which was pretty cool. We were also able to share a video, an 8-minute long video, which actually Rebecca on the Sustainability Work Group was in that video. John Metza, that's in this work group, was in that video. Some other neighbors, a couple of council members, the mayor did the narration and an intro. And it really was a great chance for us to introduce the possibilities. The city's master planning process had excluded any renderings, any photorealistic type stuff from their consultant's contract. So in the master plan, all anybody ever saw was these big watercolor blobs and big fake blocks of, purple. And that was probably not very helpful. So we've got some pretty cool stuff. I'll run through these quick and then we'll get started, just in case folks have not seen them yet. So this first one, are people seeing this? Let me zoom in here a little bit. So this is looking south from Larpenteur down into the site along Howard. The park is off here in the background. This is the node, just a sort of prototypical public art thing, but kind of putting a pinpoint on that space. This is one of these public realm, likely privately owned public space, and the higher density residential on the left here. This is Winthrop looking north. So the existing single family homes are on the left here. This is where their cul-de-sacs are right now, which is where Winthrop will connect through. And this is the low density stuff in the master plan off to the east. Feel like that's a very nice transition. There's nothing too dense or too scary about some of that. This is Howard Street, so the big spine road, showing the residential, again, the low to medium density residential off to the left, and starting to introduce the light industrial to the right. And you start to see the murals pop out. This is that arts and employment district concept you may have heard about, where we're going to ask business owners to host a community curated, community themed mural selection on the faces of their buildings to really help bring them to life. This is the 25-foot stormwater and landscape buffer up and down Howard, which will house, of course, native plantings and as much xeriscaping as possible, but also function as a district stormwater system. This is kind of a bird's eye view of the most dense part of the site. Larpenteur here, McKnight here. We think this is about where the marketplace will top out in terms of density. 5 stories of wood-framed apartments over a single concrete podium with some activated commercial uses, community uses on the first floor. You see everything's got solar on the roof all the way back to the industrial here. You see a nice little water feature, which is the functioning wetland or refunctioning wetland, I should say, and the park off in the distance. One of the things we heard a lot in the last year in the community engagement the port has been doing is we would really, as it relates to open spaces, is we really would like to see walking trails and places to sit next to the water. And so this is just one way. None of these have been designed. These are all concept designs for illustrative purposes to try and help people understand the quality of development we intend to bring to the site and amenities. And this is on the west edge of the site. This is the appendage, as we affectionately call it, that we own that goes out towards Furnace Parkway. And you see a nice dog park here. We heard a lot about dog parks and we heard a lot about community gardening. So this is just one example, not quite urban agriculture, but raised bed community gardens. We don't know what form that's going to take, but we wanted to make sure folks knew we've been listening and we've heard the desire for those kinds of amenities, and we think we can certainly deliver on that. And then this was a presentation for briefing council members. So this is where we started talking about lead for communities. So questions about any of those pretty pictures you saw? No? Cool. Well, now at least folks have something else to chew on than some pretty unimpressive two-dimensional, whatever that is. All right. So let me, I'm on the wrong computer. Sorry, guys, I got 4 screens and 2 computers going here. And Becky, I pulled up the slides on draft. You might have to pull up the updated slides, Becky.
You can just skip number 2. That's the only difference.
Oh, okay. Well then, that's it. Skip number 2, you say?
Yeah, but you might, if we want to start just with a conversation, we might as well just start talking and then bring the slides up after that.
Okay. So several of you sent in homework, which was talk to 3 to 5 people or organizations that you think don't know enough about Hillcrest and or the sustainability intentions at Hillcrest, aspirations, and either let them know or get their feedback or help us make a connection with them. So does anybody want to share anything that they might have learned? We don't really have time to report out because we got a bunch of feedback from you guys, a bunch of homework that we have to digest yet, coming in over the last couple of days here. But are there any sort of broad themes or things you were thinking about as you were talking to people, or things that people were nodding to or shaking their heads at, or anybody want to offer any highlights of just having those conversations? Chelsea, go for it.
Yeah, in sort of the run up to the master plan hearing, there was a lot of discussion among community members and community groups, and there were some broad areas of agreement and then disagreement. But one thing that there was very broad consensus on was the sustainability aspects of the plan. People were excited about that and reassured that that's an important part of this whole development.
Cool. Yeah, we've got a lot of differing views on the land use side. Everything from it should be absolutely 112 acres of green space to you need twice as many housing units on it as you have. So we really do have a pretty broad range of land use perspectives, I should say. John, are you trying to share a screen with us? Or Rebecca's got her hand up here. Rebecca, what were you thinking as related to the homework stuff? And thank you for sending that in.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. One thing that I kind of stood out with 2 people that I talked to was just land acknowledgement, as opposed, making sure that was acknowledged. Not necessarily that anything is going to be done about it, but you know, people were concerned about that, and then about, yeah, that was pretty much it. So
Well, that's interesting, Rebecca, because I know the city staff just today is trying to get their staff report ready for the Community Comprehensive Neighborhood Planning Committee of the Planning Commission, which meets next week. And that was one of they heard that multiple times in public comment on the master plan. And their reaction and what we heard in our naming exercise, because there was at least one native word that came up, I believe a Dakota word that came up as a possibility. And in talking with some folks at the state and some tribal folks, it sounded like the idea of just throwing a native associated name on the site without any real engagement felt a little not authentic. And that really, when we kick off this open spaces work group later this year, that we'd really like to be further in deep community and tribal consultation to make sure that those open spaces, the trails, the paths, those natural areas can be programmed and designed in such a way that we are honoring and acknowledging its true history. So that's something that we certainly heard and the city certainly heard, and that we're intent on honoring as well. Others that had any insight or yeah.
I'll go. Yeah, so folks, there's a couple people that I still have to talk to yet. They haven't gotten back to me. One lives right on Winthrop, on the corner, where right before the cul-de-sac, off of Lavender there, and but everybody was very interested in the renewables portion and 100% behind it. One person was interested in the individual aspects and asked about wind, and I don't think wind is part of this project. I don't know if it's still open for an option at this point. But and then the glaring elephant in the room was extra traffic above and beyond the renewables. But
yeah, I hear you. We've obviously heard that since the get-go,
yeah,
and
right.
Wind in terms of like a fully sized wind turbine is probably not permittable right, and maybe a little dangerous in this dense of an urban area. Some of those big turbines can slip ice off of them and shoot it quite a ways, I understand. But there are all kinds of, for years at the U.S. Green Building Conference, you'll walk around and there's all kinds of,
vertical,
light pole top spinners that power a light, or vertical turbines, horizontal turbines. So I think we could try and incorporate that as some kind of demonstration effort, and maybe one of these public areas just to help. We always, when we did Beacon Bluff, we branded it a next generation business center. And then we asked ourselves, well, what are you going to see when you drive down the road that tell you it's a next generation business center? Where are the solar panels? Where's the innovation? Where's the public art? And that's what we tried to deliver there. And I think we can take that to another level here.
Sure. Yeah. Sounds great.
On the traffic thing, I know that's not the focus of this group, but I will just say, on some of these roads, McKnight is 15,000 cars a day, vehicle trips. And some of these estimates are, an additional 500 to 1,500 trips, depending on what road segment you're talking about. So
yeah, these folks are closer to White Bear that I spoke that brought the traffic up. So okay, they were specifically worried about White Bear and then crossing over.
Yeah, and there was, it's been 2 years of working with the city and county traffic planners and road engineers, and so I again, it's not really what we do, and ultimately the traffic folks make the calls on where these grids have to connect and where there's a light, where there's a sign, where there's a roundabout. But that's something I know we're going to keep hearing about. So thank you for passing it along.
You bet.
Anybody else? Matt, I know you sent in some homework. Anything you were thinking about or resonated with you or you wanted to highlight as you had been talking to people?
Yeah, I think people just overall are really, really excited about the sustainability aspects of the site, environmental parts of it. And I think a lot of people are just kind of like a little jaded at this point by a lot of developments kind of being bogged down or like getting kind of done to death like we've seen with some other ones. So I just said like I've been impressed with the process so far. And I think people once they kind of hear about how it's gone and the support it's gotten so far, then it's like yeah, that's great. Then glad to hear it's moving forward. So
Well, good. Thank you all. Thanks for doing some homework and helping us reach out. And, you know, we're always trying to find new ways to connect with folks that should be plugged in, but maybe aren't for any number of reasons. You know, engagement is always takes intention. So thanks for talking to people and make sure they know we're available. And we're happy to reach out to them. Is it overstepping if if you did include any kind of identifying information? I've got some emails from folks. Is it okay if we reach out to those folks? Would anyone be concerned about that?
I don't know, thanks.
Okay. Well, if so, maybe shoot me an email separately, just saying, hey, these people don't want you bugging them. But otherwise, they might get reached out to. Okay, thank you, Chelsea. Thanks for noting that in the chat there. Okay, let's get started. We good, Becky?
Yeah, as long as I thought John might have been raising his hand there a couple times. John, did you have something that you wanted to add?
Yes, I've talked to several dozen people all over the country about this project, and without exception, they have asked for a link to the website. And they've gone through it, and they have, some haven't responded, but they were very positive when I described it, but at least half of them have said that's an incredible project. And they can't wait to be involved in it. So, and the way they're going to be involved, because most of these people are vendors for various forest products and things, and have specialty, you know, special skills that I need for the building I'm building. And I just wanted to say that there will be wind on the top of my building. Those small omnidirectional turbines, probably a dozen of them along the edges. So people will get a good idea, and I'll have really good data on what we actually generate and all that kind of stuff, which to spawn this community into other things like this, you know, it's all about data and, you know, where the rubber hits the road. So, okay.
Good to hear, John. Thank you. Thanks for being a
Yeah.
leader.
Yeah.
Well, great. Let's get into the meat of it. I'll start pulling this up. So, you know, we've been digging into these sustainability topics within Lead for Communities. We're going to start transitioning out of Lead for Communities to what's beyond Lead. Let me share this screen. Boop, boop, boop. 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 Okay. Tell me when you're seeing that, folks.
Yep.
Okay.
I
So within Lead for Communities, there's a bunch of credits. We did that starocracy exercise, and we identified areas you guys wanted to focus on, and we prioritized that for our last couple of meetings. We covered everything except for energy and greenhouse gas emissions, which we got about halfway through, and transportation and land use. So we're going to hit those today, and when we get done there, we're going to set the agenda for the next meeting by the end of this meeting, which is focusing on what you guys want to talk about outside of Lead for Buildings, Lead for Communities. I know John wants to talk mass timber, et cetera, et cetera. So be thinking about, keep that in the back of your mind about what, throughout this whole conversation, what's missing. And so with that, that's meeting to recap. Okay, yep, we did that. Let's turn it over to Becky for a deep dive on energy and greenhouse gas emissions, everyone's favorite topic to prevent climate change.
So this is a repeat slide from our last meeting, and we did talk through kind of the framing of our analysis of what it would take to be a carbon-free community. And we started talking through these design strategies. So we talked about being an all-electric community that uses a district energy system and is powered by on-site solar. Where we left off is before we got to energy efficient buildings. And then we'll also be talking about some low carbon transportation strategies in the next section today. So we'll dig right into the next slide on energy efficient buildings. So we actually started talking as a team about energy efficiency within buildings before we were talking about district systems or all electric or renewable energy, understanding that this is really the first step to getting to a carbon-free community is really reducing energy use before meeting it with those low carbon sources. So for the carbon calculations that you saw on the previous slide, we created energy models based on some initial assumptions of what types of buildings would be included in the community. And that's what Monty has zoomed into this graph here that's showing 6 different types of buildings and the energy models for them. This is showing energy use intensity, or kBTUs per square foot of, in the case of the design, just electricity use within the building. In the case of the baselines and the business as usual bars, that's looking at electricity and natural gas. So for the design, the yellow bars there, we really pushed right up to the edge of what LHB architects and mechanical engineers think that the market will accept here. So we're looking at improving building envelopes through insulation, efficient windows, and air tightness. We're looking at highly efficient mechanical systems, again, tied into that district energy system, highly efficient lighting, and strategies for reducing plug loads as well for the devices and equipment and appliances that get plugged into walls. So we compared these efficient designs to the average 2003 building, which is that first gray bar. And that is the baseline that's used for programs like SB 2030, Minnesota's Sustainable Buildings 2030 program. So that's why that's included. And then we also compared it to both the current energy code, which is that darker orange bar, as well as our best guess at what the next version of the energy code will be, which will happen during the time frame of construction at this site. So those are the 2 orange bars. So the hypothetical designs are achieving between a 70 and 82% reduction from that average 2003 building. That's the percentages that are listed above the yellow bars. It's an average of a 50% reduction from the energy code, if that's just another way to look at it. So we're currently, go ahead, Monty.
I was just going to say, Becky, that was my question right before the meeting started is,
I did some quick math.
How do I reconcile energy code versus the 2000? Is the 2003 baseline what people refer to as that CBEX type data?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. So there was an analysis or a survey of buildings that were in existence in 2003. And so that is used to establish a 2003 baseline. And then other programs have established a way of modeling specific building types that are more able to be adapted to different, space usage with them. So what we're currently working on, Monty, before we hit on this slide, before I turn it over to you, is developing covenant language to help ensure that these designs meet these aggressive energy use intensity targets. And we are hoping to get to actually cover today what those draft covenants are saying related to energy efficiency and other requirements. And then leading into the next topic, there are incentives available through Xcel Energy's conservation improvement programs, both for conducting energy modeling for the designs, as well as for implementing specific energy efficiency measures. And the port will be providing turnkey PACE financing that can be used not only for the solar installations, but also for these energy efficiency strategies. So I think unless there are any questions about energy efficiency or how the modeling worked, we can move on to talk about more generally what the funding sources and needs are for the carbon-free community as a whole.
I'll spend 60 seconds on PACE, just so folks have some concept of what it is, because you'll hear a lot about it for the next amount of 10 years we're doing this. So PACE is property assessed clean energy financing. It's approved by state legislatures differently around the country, but the concept is very similar. The idea that entities, in this case, the Port Authority, got a pot of money from Obama stimulus money, ERA money, Recovery Act money, $5 million, which we then have revolved and revolved and revolved, and eventually rolled it into this PACE program. It's a very secure form of debt. It's a loan against a property. And the mechanism to pay back that loan is, instead of writing them a check out of your checkbook every month, you pay the debt service for that loan via a property tax assessment. And property tax assessments are very secure, right? Because no one wants to lose their property to the bank, and the bank doesn't want to lose its property to the county. So even if the bank takes your house, the property tax assessments are going to get paid, right? As they have to for these properties to be transferred. So it's a very secure guarantee, if you will. But the key thing is that PACE, as we utilize it, and we've got $300 million of this type of financing across the state of Minnesota. We've got joint powers agreements with like 56 of the 87 counties or something to do this all over Minnesota. The key is, at least as my finance guy has taught me over the years, it's what we call cash flow positive financing. So the idea, if PACE is structured correctly, if your debt service on the loan for your solar panels or your energy efficiency project is $10 a year, you should be saving $12 a year in energy, meaning you're saving more than the debt service costs you, cash flow positive. It's still debt. It's not free money. So we still have to convince these owners to take on additional debt to do something, as Becky said, that is pushing the bounds of what the market wants to do. But as business owners learn about this type of debt and its minimal impact on cash flow, which is what I think John would tell you, most businesses are most concerned about is cash flow on a daily, weekly, annual basis. If it's not a hit to cash flow, then yeah, this maybe sounds good. And if the payback is in year 7 and then I have no debt service and then I'm getting all this free energy from the sun, wow, that would be dumb not to do that. So we think we've never done this before, and I'm frankly kind of out on a limb here. When we drop this to the marketplace, it's going to be, hey guys, you have to buy a piece of dirt here, you have to maximize your rooftop with solar PV. You don't have to use us, but we will offer turnkey PACE financing. And we think the marketplace will accept that. There will be some in the marketplace that will not, and we'll lose them along the way. But at the end of the day, we don't have to convince the universe this is a great idea. We only have to convince 10 or 12 or 15 different buyers that this is a good idea. And we think they're out there because guys like John exist in the universe. Okay. So carbon-free costs. This was an exercise we did early on to figure out the top is costs, the bottom is savings. The column on the left is if there is no district energy system, and the column on the right is if there is a district energy system. And what this shows us is that over a 25-year period, in any scenario, there's more or less about the same amount of savings as there are costs. So this would appear, given the right financial structure, this would appear to be doable. What this also shows us is that using a district energy system can help reduce the cost of the building scale energy efficiency measures. So you see the numbers for residential and industrial energy efficiency are lower with a district system than without a district system. And what we've realized is the bucket of funding that is hardest to fill is the building scale energy efficiency, precisely because of the problem I just mentioned. there will be a limit to how much debt these business owners want to take on. And so the more we can offload their energy efficiency costs to a district system and ask that district system to carry more of the efficiency, the better off we are, because it's easier for us to figure out how to finance a public utility or even a private utility than it is to ask 15 different business owners to take on X and Y and Z more debt than they had intended to. What we have also found, and there was a great USGBC event here about a month ago, the research team at Cushman Wakefield had done a report on cap rates, capitalization rates, when selling Class A office buildings. And it found in some cases a 20 to 40% better capitalization rate, which leads to the value of these buildings, if they were LEED green buildings. So these energy efficiency savings, they have their own operational cash flow benefits, but they also create some inherent value for these green assets. That's something that we are trying to help communicate and teach the commercial development real estate marketplace, is that this is the future. In 7 to 10 years, with New York, Boston, California mandating net zero buildings by 2030 or 2035, depending on the locality, the marketplace does see these things coming, and smart market players are making these investments. So in 10 years, they don't have a stranded asset that's suffering a brown discount because they can't sell that asset for as much as it should be or would have been worth, because there's now a price on carbon, or because now there's regulation saying the buyer is going to have to upgrade it upon purchase, or whatever the case may be. So there are a lot of funding sources that we are cobbling together to do this. The state of Minnesota, city of St. Paul, Excel's got its SIP programs, Property Assessed Clean Energy. We're talking to the U.S. Department of Energy on a fairly regular basis, and private equity groups. What are we missing here? That's a big question. And this is a little in the weeds, but there's so much funding out there from different corners. We just wanted to pause here and take a check and see if any of you are aware of some type of program, or have heard or seen or dreamt of something that might help us pull this off from a financial perspective. Are we missing something here? Oh, John, I see you waving.
Yeah. Not so much on the financing front, but I know there's a lot of grant money available.
Yes,
I've applied for a major grant related to this. I think there's a good chance I'll get it. And there's a second one now that has come up. Especially if you want to do wood structures, if we can find a way to crack that nut, that it's just such a good thing for so many different businesses, not least is the timber industry, which is of course having trouble right now with trucking, but that'll pass. And they're very willing to step up with so many things and help out. So that's my only point I can put in there. The rest of the financing, I know nothing about.
Chelsea, did you have something to offer?
I dropped out for a second, so I'm not sure if I missed anything, but I was wondering about the possibility of cooperative ownership models for financing, for example, or finance person. So I don't know how these things work, but wondering if that's on the table.
Are you thinking of like cooperative energy futures model? Is that what you're referring to?
Something like that.
We are. I'm pretty familiar with the cooperative energy futures folks. I think we've talked about, and if that could be a fit, we certainly would be open to it. Becky and I, so cooperative energy futures deploys community solar gardens in a way that is equitable. I can't remember what their tagline is. equitable solar or something like that. And it has to do with workforce and installation and everything from kind of soup to ownership, financing, et cetera. That is kind of the outlier. And we have to remember two things. Not all community solar gardens mean ownership by the community. Most of them, frankly, don't. And for this net zero exercise, we really need to try to keep all the RECs on site. And I think in some of those models, depending on the ownership, those renewable energy credits might leave the site. They might be accounted for somewhere else, which works against us being able to count them towards being carbon neutral. And it's kind of a philosophical dilemma in some ways. If we're putting up new solar, we're putting up new solar. Who gets to count the beans maybe is a bit of an artifice, but some of us got to count beans in order to prove we've done something, right? I mean, so I'm with you, and we're certainly open to. I think it's going to take everything and anything we can throw at all this, frankly. So
Well,
happy to.
I was just going to say, in terms of the philosophical angle, the idea to have all the energy produced locally seems philosophically in line with having that owned locally. And so ideally the people who live on site would own the energy, and I assume the RECs would be retained then in the neighborhood. So I think there's a philosophical alignment, even if I don't necessarily understand all the financing, that could be a potential financing resource that would keep the wealth and the equity within the community itself. Gotcha.
Yep. We would want to find that nexus. I think someone told me the other day the largest owner of community solar gardens in Minnesota is like Berkshire Hathaway or something. It really gets to be a tax tool for some of these investors if it's done in a certain way. So we'd want to be careful about it, but I think we will continue to explore that, Chelsea. Okay. Please, again, guys, I'll put it on the table. It's $100 million to pull this off. It's not $100 million of new money. It's $100 million of reallocating capital. An energy system is going to be built. What kind of energy system and how it's built, that's what we're finessing. These buildings are going to be built. The energy systems they have are going to be built, how they're built, and what types of energy they're using. Of the $100 million, we believe almost $50 million of it is PACE financing eligible. That gets us a big chunk of the way there. $36 million of it is the district energy system. Those are revenue bonds. That's how we have financed our 30-year-old energy park utility company. So, but when you get down to the nub, there still gets to be a bucket that we can't fill. And so any ideas about grants, financing sources, just as you're tooling around and reading a cool article, feel free to shoot this team, shoot me an email. Hey, saw this the other day. Don't have to know if it works. Don't have to even finish reading the article. If it looks like energy and it's got a dollar sign attached to it, shoot it to me and we'll deal with figuring out if it works or not. Okay, should we keep going? We need to keep going. I think this is Tiffany, correct?
Okay, yes, absolutely. So transportation and land use, can everybody hear me on my microphone? I just want to confirm before I keep going. Okay. This is one of the things that we have discussed at length, get through the master planning process. And I think in general, feel like we've got our bases very covered for Lead for Communities Platinum certification. But just to summarize everything for you, the transportation and land use goals for Lead for Community requires a compact, mixed use, and transit-oriented development, which we're definitely achieving given the distribution of zoning designations throughout the site, especially toward the north end, where there will be an official neighborhood node. And that's something that comes out of not just the master plan, but from the City of St. Paul's 2040 comp plan. Walkability and bikeability have been a area of focus throughout the master planning process. Access to quality transit is something that is mostly in the hands of Metro Transit, but something that it is a continuing conversation to make sure we're able to improve that. Alternative fuel vehicles, usually focusing on electrical vehicle charging stations and how we can welcome that type of transportation into the site has been an ongoing conversation. Smart mobility and transportation policy is a pretty easy one to cover in this case because Metro Transit is already trying to do this with all of their planning measures. So making sure that they're being efficient with their GPS systems, passenger information systems, and integrated ticketing. And then historic sites, which this does not qualify as one because it's a brownfield site that needs to be remediated. So that's not a issue that we really need to be overly focused on. So if we go to the next slide. As I mentioned, the neighborhood node is going to be on the north end of the site. So we've already looked at this rendering where we have anticipated a lot of 5-story residential buildings over 1 story of retail or commercial space with structured parking underneath them. That still needs to be evaluated by the development community as well as a lot of community development partnerships in the area. But that's kind of the general direction that everything is moving in, and the emphasis would be on a proximity to diverse uses. So it's not going to be 100% studio apartments. It's going to be a wide variety of housing options as well as commercial and industrial space, and access to green space is the big thing there. So hopefully when it's all said and done, 10 to 15 years from now, there'll be a daycare, there'll be a place to buy coffee, there'll be a place to get your teeth cleaned or get your dry cleaning done, those types of things. So you can feel like you can go for a walk, check 3 or 4 errands off your list, and still be in a walkable neighborhood. The walkability and bikeability is part of every single streetscape plan. So this is a really good visualization of one possibility for how dense the buildings will be on the site and then how those relate to the different streetscapes that are being planned. Red are the neighborhood node streets, which are really emphasizing the pedestrian space along the sides of the street. So wider sidewalks, gracious boulevards, making sure that there's plenty of space for people and bicycles to move through the site. The purple streets are making sure that we're accommodating truck traffic for our light industrial owner users to make sure that these larger trucks can move through the space efficiently without clogging up the places where we want our pedestrians to be. And then the yellow streetscapes on the west end of the site are very much in line with a traditional residential street development scheme that has been already laid out in St. Paul's Street Design Guide Manual. So if we look at the next slide, these are all of the streetscapes that are in the master plan right now, and every single one of them have pedestrian facilities, which is just code for sidewalk, on both sides of the street. Every single one of them either has a dedicated bike lane or a very bike-friendly road design. So you should be able to walk absolutely anywhere on the site and have a safe place to be as you're walking your dog or you're taking your kid out in your stroller and not feel like you're having a conflict with adjacent vehicular traffic. So as I said, I feel like everyone on the development team thinks that we've really covered our bases with walkability and bikeability and this overall concept of dense development. But if we've overlooked anything, please let us know. If you feel like there's a specific location that needs additional attention, this would be something that we would want to hear from you. It's okay if you feel like we did an awesome job and you don't have anything else to add. Okay, we did great.
Right. Okay, access to quality transit. So
I guess, I do just have one comment. I thought I heard recently that St. Paul like got rid of all of the Lime scooters, and so like shared electric scooters, and I don't even see, so I haven't seen those around anymore, and I'm wondering if that's something that would have to be revisited for this site, if that is one option.
It could be that they have decided that the way that that particular program is being implemented is being done in an unsafe manner. So each city has a very different philosophy about how these programs get welcomed into their public realm. And some of them are doing a better job than others of making sure that the scooters are left behind in an acceptable location, that people are getting access to them in an equitable way. So I don't know specifically about what the relationship is between the city of St. Paul and the Lime Company with the scooters. But if they've disappeared recently, I suspect it has something to do with the fact that the scooters are being left in places that they shouldn't be. And it's just maybe not being a very well managed program. So, but the scooter concept in general is a really great one. And if St. Paul can come to understanding with a company that can execute it safely, then it would ideally be one of the many, many options available in Hillcrest and the entire city.
We can follow up with Russ and folks at the city on that. Samantha Henningsen, I'm sure, and others have some insight. But it does segue very nicely into our next slide, which has a photo of said scooters. So folks like Becky, our in-house greenhouse gas researcher expert, will tell you that once we decarbonize the buildings and we decarbonize the infrastructure, you guys have seen the slides by now, we still are left with this bucket of carbon emissions from travel. And so we are looking for low carbon transportation strategies. The ones we've talked about are, yes, scooters. I think maybe I reported at the last meeting, or maybe not. Have a dear friend, Shannon, that works at Our Car. We talked recently about the deployment of the EV spot network, which Hillcrest is outside the range of. But when I walked her through the master plan and the scope of the development, she said, let me talk to some folks around the shop here and see if we can't figure out a site-specific project to work on with you guys at Hillcrest. So we would love to see something on that order of shared vehicles with electric charging and electric charging stations. We think that would be wonderful. In terms of those low carbon travel emissions, well, if you can walk to work, then you're not emitting any carbon. And we think we are providing opportunities for workforce housing right next to jobs. And we are incentivizing businesses to hire locally. So I know folks like Kurt Steffen, the president of McQueen Equipment over on East 7th Street, when we did a transaction with them, Kurt was like, wow, I wish there was more housing immediately. I would love my folks to be able to walk to work because that way I know they can get here in a snowstorm, in, some kind of emergency. They don't have to have two vehicles for every household. So we think the live work options, which also includes things like being able to work remotely, and is a little different than, living in proximity to your job is a little different than I live on top of my workshop type use. And I think we'll need to maximize all of those opportunities to get people working close to their homes to drive that travel carbon down. We are talking about, is this alternative fuel? Yes. Are you guys hearing or have other ideas on low carbon transportation strategies?
I do. Have we talked to Nice Ride or anything like that yet?
No, thank you. We have not. Bike share.
Yeah, because I believe, because Furness is part of, quote unquote, the grand round, whenever that's completed. But that would get people to downtown via bike, and then over to the north side of the city, and then also right to downtown as well, depending on which way you went.
Thank you. I personally had not thought of that. I'm sure Becky and Tiffany had. Are there other bike options? I'm familiar with Nice Ride. Let's say they say you guys are in the wrong zip code. We can't serve you. Are there other similar services or concepts? John?
There are. I don't know what they are right now, but yes, there are. And I'm sure Jessica would come up. Huh?
John, did you have something?
Not bicycles, but I'm not sure how much you're aware of. Tesla has a master plan to have autonomous vehicles moving people with their self-driving package, which is still in the beta stage. But it's a major plan to change car ownership. And it's knowing Elon Musk, it's going to happen. And the need to own your own car, for many people, they still want to own a car, but it's gonna go away in a few years if you don't want to. And we already have these services, where you just get a car when you want to go somewhere. But this is a really ambitious project, and so I wouldn't be surprised if the landscape changes so much that some of these problems evaporate. But that's yet to be seen.
We'll dig into that a little bit, John, and see if there's anything we can do to, I know in downtown areas there's been okay, well, we've got all these autonomous cars. Where do they go when they don't have people in them? Is there a staging area for them? Do they drive out of town and park up by the airport until they're called in? I mean, all sorts of issues. If we trade out parking because you don't need to own and park your own car, where do the actual things that the pods that people are getting in, where do they live?
I can tell you what Musk's plan is that when you buy your vehicle spends what 98% of its time sitting. It's an asset depreciating constantly. He wants your car to leave your garage at night and deliver and move people, or while you're at work, it will take off and go. So existing homeowners with garages will have an asset that makes money for them. And I know it sounds crazy, like I would never let my car, but there's a rating system for Airbnb and all that controls that. And the cars, of course, have camera.
Right?
Yeah, exactly. And it's one of the most ingenious ideas that I've heard, and they're working very, very hard to make this happen. So we could live in a very different landscape even 2 years from now. So it'll be really interesting to see.
Well, we figure this is a 10-year absorption for the Heights. And so I imagine we'll see a lot of different land use and transportation ideas as we move forward here. We'll dig into that, John, and see if we're setting ourselves up for success here.
Yeah. One other thing I wanted to ask, and it's kind of off topic, is there any plan for advertising for this community? And specifically advertising the fact that, you imagine a commercial. How would you like to live right next to where you work? Because when I talk to people, I've talked to hundreds of people about this project. They all just drool at that. That is like a dream, to not have to sit and commute in their car. And some people are totally against it because they love listening to talk radio, whatever. But there's a lot of people who are going to jump on that right away. So if we had some way to advertise this, it may open the floodgates of people wanting to reserve apartments or townhomes or whatever it is there. Of course, and also, I'm looking at it as a great recruiting technique for employees because I know the benefits, since my employees, a lot of them live very close to this, within walking distance. It's a huge deal. It really is.
We haven't rolled out a marketing plan yet, but that is a great hook. And we're trying to get people to live and work here. So definitely something we can consider. Let me keep cruising here. We want to get to our discussion. This is just a diagram showing where we believe there will be potential public parking, of which we want 4% of those to be about 160 spots to have EV charging. So I think the EV spot network is it 70 nodes with 2 cars and 4 charging stations. So that's across the entire metro. So to do 160 in one site doesn't seem insignificant. seems quite significant. Our draft covenants, you'll see in a minute here, Becky will walk us through. They require at least 20% of the spots to have EV charging, with the rest of them being EV ready, meaning they have the right conduit, room in the breaker box, etc. Light industrial in the parking lots, we are going to require them to have 20% of the parking spots to have EV charging, with another 30% being EV ready. One of the reasons that's a little less is we do believe that, the data shows that people charge most at night, overnight at home. But we do believe there's some opportunities for folks to charge while they're at work. So are there ideas from the work group about access, public access, technologies, ownership models that would help us deploy this? I mean, we're somewhat familiar with the EV spot network and the Our Car, but specifically as it comes to EV charging, what are folks hearing that this type of development could take advantage of, or should be thinking of and taking advantage of?
I would like to say that we have 4 EVs that charge at my current site off solar. One cannot underestimate the power of free to motivate people to buy an EV, okay, and to say it's free. There will be an abundance of power during the daytime on most days, extra power in this community to charge vehicles for free. I think it should be the model. I know that the current charging networks that are out there, the public ones and stuff, are all for fee. But there should be at least some percentage that are free, because it just drives people to buy EVs. It does, and people need a little kick sometimes. And there's going to be lots of power.
$5 a gallon.
Oh, and it's just going to get worse. And we can't underestimate how fast this EV adoption is going to happen too. It's already exceeding the rates that all of the major automakers, with the exception of Tesla, have predicted that it would go. And this latest spike in gas prices has caused all of the Tesla vehicles to be sold out far into the future. They were sold out in the future, but now it's much farther. And all the existing ones that have been bought to be worth more to sell than they paid for them originally, even with 40, 50,000 miles on them. There's going to be a transition here happening, especially, one of my employees has had a Tesla for 6 months now, has yet to put 1 cent into the car for energy because she charges right here. She comes in and charges off the solar. Once a week, charges up. It is such a powerful motivator.
We have talked about this idea. I think Rick Carter from LHB joked with us initially, well, Monty, you guys just have to give away a free electric vehicle with every housing unit, right? Well, that's maybe not possible, but Teslas are also an example of a probably higher end EV. Is anyone aware, other than like the federal tax credit, is anyone aware of any funding sources to help offset or subsidize? Is there a local, regional, state, federal program we're unaware of that could help us target for any purpose, any targeted group that could offset the cost of buying an EV? I do see Rebecca has her hand up here. Rebecca?
Yeah, hi there. Sorry to interrupt, John. I just wanted to mention that in Payne Phelan, we have a pilot program going out, also in Powderhorn Park in Minneapolis, with the EV cars, involving car sharing. So you can basically, for a small fee, go and pick up an electric car, parked at one of the parking stations, kind of rent it for however long you need it, return it to any place within the area that's designated, and go on about your business.
Rebecca, I think I saw one of these on the streets of downtown St. Paul here the other day. I parked behind one on the street, and it EV, I always thought it was EV. It's EVIE is the name of that spot network, right?
Correct, yep. It's
Okay.
also part of the, kind of with our car.
Yeah.
also. Yeah.
Yeah, and you can drop those you don't have to return them to another charging station. You can leave them anywhere, or you have to return them to one of those nodes.
You can return it to one of those nodes, but you can also just drop it anywhere within a certain area. They have a grid, a
Yeah.
huge area grid, and somebody comes along during the night or whatever and puts it back, brings it to another charging station. So
Wow. Okay.
yeah, it's an
Nice.
app. It's really, really easy to use. I used one the other day, and
Oh, cool.
it was really cool. Yeah.
I can't wait. I can't wait to try one. Chelsea, is that what you wanted to share as well?
Really has a question too.
Chelsea, I'm sorry, you were breaking up there a little bit. Can you repeat that?
Oh, I have, they might be related. Can you hear me?
You're cutting in and out. There's one right by your house. Keely, you had a question on parking and land use?
Yeah, I was just curious, and we can come back to it if it's like a longer answer, I guess, but how it was determined how much parking would be on site, because I feel like if we want to really integrate alternative transportation, I don't know, parking lots may not need to be quite as large as they are in some other light industrial sites. I guess when I was thinking about it, I wouldn't want to see just a bunch of empty parking lots at the end of a night or something, or maybe there could be some sort of, if there are EV charging stations on the industrial sites, like the neighborhoods could park their EVs there to charge, or yeah. So I was just curious how parking, as far as a percentage of the land use, was determined.
So what you saw in that diagram is all hypothetical, but it's buildable. It would probably all be permittable. The city has done away or is about to do away with any parking minimums. But they do have some limits on maximums. And so each building has to go through its own site plan review and determine its appropriate amount of parking. The concern is until this adoption really happens, most of the businesses that show up will say, you're telling me I have to bring 100 employees to the site. That means I need 100 parking spaces. I mean, in most of these business owners' minds, other than our enlightened few like John here, a job equals a parking space, especially in an area that's not super well served by transit yet. I think over the course of time, we'll see that shift, and you could see these parking lots when, as owners realize they don't need that much parking, you could see building expansions, which adds jobs and investment and tax base, which is good in an economic developer's mind, like mine. We have talked, Councilmember Yang has expressed some concern about these parking lots being empty and how they could be repurposed or multi-purposed. We do know that some of these businesses will have 2 and 3 shifts and may have people coming and going all day and all night. Some of them will be 9 to 5, 8 to 5, whatever. But we've talked about some ideas about license agreements and to allow for community use for food truck gatherings and off hours or on weekends if these businesses aren't open, all sorts of different stuff. But until we see the true shift in the marketplace, it's hard to convince these owners who are really concerned about getting workers there and having a place for them to having a way for them to get to work, and if they're driving, having a place for them to park. It is kind of a land use conundrum. I mean, you guys are asking the right question. We don't have a great solution for it yet, other than we need the jobs and we have to make sure people can get here. And right now they don't have a great way to get here. So I don't know if that's an answer or just a commiseration. Rebecca has her hand up again. Rebecca?
No, sorry, I just forgot to put it down.
Okay. let's keep moving because we do want to get into these covenants. John, you got a quick one? Oh, you're muted, John.
Yes, but I'll wait. Get into the covenants.
Okay, because the covenants, guys, like literally we're trying to write these now. So when people start coming asking for land, we know what to tell them is expected of them. And so that's why this group is meeting. We want to take your ideas and all of these aspirational goals and put them into legal documents that we can make requirements. So Becky's going to get into that. You know, the sustainability lead for communities we've talked about is really about the whole site. The sustainability covenants and lead for buildings really get it down to the building scale. So we're trying to hit this balance of what achieves these sustainability goals and being acceptable in the marketplace. We want to lead the market. We can't bleed the market. What Becky's going to walk you through here is still in draft. I mean, this is what we've been ginning up as we've been walking through lead for communities. But that's why we're putting it out here in front of you, so you guys can help us get it to some kind of final status. Not necessarily today, but by the time we wrap all this up. So Becky, with that, do you want to get into covenants?
Sure, and I think we'll go through this relatively quickly because we do want to make sure to have plenty of time to do an around the room and get your feedback on what we need to spend our next meetings talking about. And so keep that in mind, that that's really the end goal for today. And if it's something where, hey, we didn't talk quite enough about that energy efficiency covenant, let's really dig into that more, then that can be something that we talk more about in the next meeting. But basically, the covenants are using a foundation, trying to ensure that each building achieves a foundational level of sustainability kind of across all categories by using either LEED or green communities and certifying to one of those programs. And then there's also what I can call like an overlay component for the categories that we've identified as high priorities for the community as a whole. So many of the things that we've been talking about in terms of energy efficient buildings, electrification, renewables, district energy, embodied carbon, EVs, all of those things. So that's kind of generally how it's set up. And on the next slide, we show some of the categories that are included within LEED. So this is LEED at a building scale. It has many of the same categories as LEED for communities does. It addresses carbon, energy, ecosystems, water, waste, transportation, materials, health, and indoor environmental quality. It's set up in a similar way as LEED for communities in terms of it has about a dozen prerequisites that every building would be required to meet. So that's things like reducing construction pollution, reducing water use, achieving a baseline level of energy efficiency, tracking energy and water use, achieving a baseline level of indoor air quality. And then to get certification, you also have to get 40 points out of an available 110. And this scorecard shows that, there are a lot of points available in the energy and atmosphere category, especially to optimize energy performance. A lot of points available in indoor environmental quality and land use, and kind of just how those categories break out. Now, there is also an alternative option for residential projects that receive funding from Minnesota Housing. So Minnesota Housing requires the use of green communities as a framework, as a green building framework. And this option for the Heights would allow those projects to build off of that work, but they'd actually need to certify to green communities. And that will enable them to kind of use what they're already needing to work on rather than build in a completely separate rating system. And green communities was developed specifically for affordable housing and has a lot of the same categories and types of things, the same framework of a certain number of required credits and achieving a certain number of optional points. So I think just to spend like a minute on the overlay components, we have an overlay component for energy efficiency to achieve a certain percentage reduction in annual energy costs and annual greenhouse gas emissions. And these overlays, to the extent that's possible, are set up as achieving certain credits or certain numbers of points within those two systems, LEED and green communities. So it's not trying to go outside the system. It's saying, okay, you're getting certified, and within that certification, you need to get at least 15 points in this optimized energy performance credit. Or in the case of green communities, achieve one of these two criteria, which is focused on near zero energy or zero energy. Let's keep scrolling through these, Monty,
Becky,
and we can.
To be sure, that 40 or 50% that you're talking about here, that equates back to that design chart we looked at that showed 70 to 82% reduction from the 2003 baseline.
Yeah, so it's looking at the code baseline rather than the 2003 baseline.
Yeah, I will get that burnt into my brain here eventually.
So also covenants, of course, for renewable energy, maximizing PV systems on rooftops, making sure they're high efficiency panels, making sure the RECs are maintained or credited to the development. Ownership of those systems is flexible as long as the RECs are maintained. So whether it's community owned or third party owned or whatever, and then PACE financing is encouraged. Next slide. Energy sources, so this is just what we talked about during the last meeting of restricting natural gas service and connecting each building to the district energy heating and cooling system. For embodied carbon, which I don't think we've talked that much about, there is a credit in LEED that requires conducting a life cycle assessment of the structure and enclosure. So looking at over the life cycle of the wood or of the steel or of the concrete, how much global warming potential is that building contributing? So the idea is that buildings would conduct a life cycle assessment and then evaluate the feasibility of reducing that global warming potential by 5 to 10%. So that is in line with a specific credit from LEED. And this is definitely an area that you can say that we want to dig more into in our future meetings. EV support, I think Monty already covered this pretty clearly, so we can skip through that one. Waste, all buildings need to implement a construction waste management plan and divert at least 50% while striving for 75% of construction waste from landfills incineration. And then they need to provide storage areas for segregated waste collection, not just recycling, but also organics recycling. And then reporting, so in monthly intervals, report whole building energy consumption, on-site generation, electrical demand, and water use. And this is something where it's important for both tracking the carbon-free status of the community as a whole, but we also see as potential to help ensure that energy efficient operations are being met, since seeing this type of data helps building owners manage their energy use. I think with that, we should get into the around the room to address what we want to talk about at our next meeting, what we have not talked about yet that you'd like to explore further, what have we talked about that we need to dig into more, what's going beyond the LEED framework, all of that.
Okay, do you mind if I jump in?
Please.
Okay. Yeah, one thing I think I'm very familiar with green communities, of course, but and LEED. One thing aspect I think we're missing is the impact on the human environment there. So, like how hiring, folks that are local. Putting a percentage tag on that. And it doesn't fit into either one of these models, I know. But it's something that I would be interested in seeing.
Are you thinking about other human impacts like daylight or air quality or indoor air quality, or more about that economic? And
it's more on the economic end, but yeah. Yes. Yeah. So, and albeit from construction to the entire result, which I know can be difficult, mandating a private business to hire from local, but
it hasn't been part of the focus of this group, but we have been working with another cohort of folks to revitalize our 30-year-old workforce agreement model, which does have local hiring targets, enforcement mechanisms. We're retooling that as we speak.
wonderful.
And I have been at USGBC a constant proponent and a critic of the fact that these systems really lack the third leg of the stool around equity. And as an as a sustainability industry, we do a crap job at equity anyway. So I'd be happy at one of these next meetings to spend 10 minutes showing you where we're at on that exercise, if that would be of interest to the group.
Yes. Oh, that would be great for me. Or otherwise, you could email it to me. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Chelsea?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm really interested in the water on the site, and I liked the plan, what the master plan had to say about the stormwater treatment. I thought it was really attractive and also thoughtful, but I would like to learn more about it, and especially since we know that there's going to be more droughts and more floods in our future. How is that taken into account on the site? And also how is this site helping clean up water? Because we also know that there's contamination in this area from PFAs and other things. So like as somebody who lives here, I'm worried about PFAs in my groundwater. And I'd like to know if there are ways that the heights can account for that or mitigate that, or I would like to learn more about water use on site.
Thank you.
Other
things? Yep, go ahead.
Kind of a follow-up to Chelsea's too, with the parking lots of if it's possible for those to be made out of more permeable like materials, because I know that was some of or as far as remediation goes, like certain soils were supposed to be put under parking lots. And yeah, I don't know how that fits in.
We, in one of our last developments, we put 25 parking stalls with filter pave. This is crushed glass combined with a resin. It's completely permeable. And we're testing this right now. It's in a parking lot out off Energy Park Drive at our Midway joint venture. And Capital Region Watershed District, we instrumented the underground stormwater system with a bunch of standpipes. And in partnership with the PCA and Capital Region Watershed, we're testing that system because there's a lot of questions about these underground infiltration systems. And are we simply moving stormwater, contaminated stormwater with crap off of the parking lot? By infiltrating it, are we just moving those contaminants into groundwater? Or is the molecular chemistry such that they're actually adsorbing the chemical molecules to the grains of sand and trapping it? So there's a lot of conventional wisdom, but there's actually internationally not a lot of science. We've presented some of this research in a couple of our systems nationally. So yes, absolutely, we can do some cool stuff with these. These are on my desk. These are little coasters made out of filter pave that they gave me at one point.
I guess the question is is that feasible then to use materials like that if some of the mercury or some of the contaminated soils were supposed to be going under?
That's exactly what the PCA helps us determine. So they will help us look at, okay, well, if you're going to do this stormwater practice, what's going on underneath it? And are you infiltrating through contaminated soil? In which case they would probably prevent us. And they would also, if we were going to do a BMP for infiltration, we would make sure we weren't putting contaminated stuff under it, for example. But great question. And we've done a lot of work on next generation stormwater management that we haven't really touched on here. Maybe we could spend some time on that as well. Other things, we've got 5 minutes left, and we want to make sure that we're talking and focusing on the stuff you guys think you haven't heard or haven't heard enough about. Yanni, you got something? Yeah.
Yeah, there was two. It was like the first or second slide when we were buzzing through this, and I forget what the topic was. Before EV cars, because we had covered that. Boarding, building cert, walkability, nope. It was when we were going through carbon free homework. No, it was like one or two right before the electric vehicle section or slide.
There's alternative fuel EVs.
Yep, and then I think it was it Becky that was doing the slides? The brief right before, yeah. Energy efficiency. What's it renewable? Embodied carbon, I guess. Yeah, I'd like to expand more on that in the next meeting. Yeah.
Yeah, we as an industry, we've all started focusing on embodied carbon a heck of a lot more in, what would you say, Becky, the last 3 years, maybe 5 years tops. We really didn't. It was kind of the dirty little secret was all this embodied carbon in all these built structures that everyone was ignoring until about 5 years ago.
Right.
Yeah. Yes, and I have something to add to that. I'm drawing a blank. Sorry, I looked at a picture and it flew out of my head. I would like to have us talk or talk more, or offline. I'd like to talk with whoever is who can be influenced regarding the PV arrays, because I've learned so much about PV array and the practicality of living with it, with snow, with ice, all those kinds of things. I think I have a lot to add to maybe some rules that could be written about these PV arrays, because the current state of the art is understandably just get them up there and throw a bunch of extras up there and forget about the snow because it's only, so many days a year. But when you do the math over the lifetime of these PV arrays, which will have 80% of their capacity after 30 years, the numbers are astounding if you design them slightly differently to be able to shed their own snow. And it's not that big of a deal. In fact, I'm in the process of designing that system. So I want to try to get involved with that, and maybe we can talk offline or something.
Yeah. Hey, John, we'll connect to you. We've got Impact Power Solutions, IPS Solar, on a small contract to help us figure all this out. And there are some technical folks there that could have a great conversation with you, I'm sure. I want to make sure we get all the way around the horn. Rebecca, are there things that you haven't heard, want to hear more about, think we need to dig further into or go further beyond?
They've already been touched on by.
Okay.
So yeah, the questions I had were already talked about.
Okay. Matt, other things I see in the chat here, you are interested in stormwater permeable paving as well. We can spend some time on that, absolutely. Other things, Matt, you want us to dig deeper on?
Yeah, I think that was the thing that interested me at the moment, just kind of in tying in with the whole parking aspect, given that is something that people around here I think are concerned about. They don't want to see these big parking lots, but obviously if there's no alternative to that, then we got to figure out ways to make it as I guess comfortable as possible. But I'd be interested in taking a deeper look at that.
Yeah, sure thing.
On a separate subject, I'd like to talk more about embodied carbon, because I think if we don't have some sort of a standard in the covenant for percentage of embodied carbon that should be in here, renewable source, that we'd be missing an opportunity. Not so much as having a completely wood building. I know it's a stretch for some people, but there are small little changes you can make a big difference.
Yep, concrete mix, et cetera. Yep, absolutely. Keely, I think you had chimed in about the parking and public transportation credits. I know some employers do offer as a benefit, bus passes, that type of thing. It would be great if we get the scooter thing, the electric vehicle share thing, to have these employers participate and incentivize their employees. I think the Port Authority would consider that. What in this workforce agreement idea, what we're really trying to do is expand how we define employee benefits. One of the ways you earned a land subsidy for 30 years at the Port Authority was by providing employee benefits, really just meaning employer-sponsored healthcare insurance was the only thing we really counted. Well, now we're talking about wealth creation strategies like tuition assistance and home ownership, first home down payment assistance, and career laddering and upskilling and these kinds of things. Those are also benefits and good corporate behavior that we want to reward and support. Well, transit support, transit incentives, that also could be one of these things that counts as a benefit. Other things, Keely, that you wanted us to go further into, you didn't hear enough about, want to hear more about, or tell us more about?
Not off the top of my head right now.
Okay. Well, I think this is shaping up a good agenda for next time. Becky, Tiffany, anything in closing here? I'm looking at the homework ideas, and maybe we don't need homework, or maybe the three of us need to chat about that offline for this next one.
Yeah, I think we can follow up with that, and certainly if you have other ideas for things that you'd like to focus the next work group on, maybe especially after
what about funding sources?
Minutes get sent out.
Funding sources, yes. That would be
good homework.
That would be some great homework. Is send us some rabbit hole grant ideas to go chase down, please. We love chasing OPM around here, other people's money.
Good. Yeah, I've seen a couple, but they're not on the top of my head. I'll have to dig for them.
Cool. We'd appreciate it, guys. We'll run them down to the extent we can.
My main thought that would maybe be useful to discuss next time is the live work concept and how to incentivize people to live close to their jobs that we would assume would be on the Hillcrest site. And especially a question for John. And do you think that there's any flexibility to have the employer directly incentivize an employee to live within a half mile of the site or within a mile of the site? So not necessarily in a new development on Hillcrest, but you're an employer, you have your employee's home address, you know approximately where they live, and could they get $100 bonus every month if they live within a mile of the site, the same way that you can incentivize an employee to use alternative transportation.
I love that idea. I currently don't need it because what I find with my population of employees is by living close to work, they automatically don't need or don't drive a second car. And it's for many of these families, it's such a huge deal. You wouldn't believe it. They were going out to the far northwest.
I mean, the research shows that's, $10,000, $12,000 a year of disposable income that you could put back in a family's pocket.
Yes, it's a big deal. And that's why the advertising is so critical. But I think, yes, that's something I never thought of, but I think it's really good.
Yeah,
really
we've been
good.
having these conversations offline a lot, and how to get the apartment buildings, let's say, to give somebody a discount on their rent if they live close to their job. But it seems easier if it's totally managed through the employer.
Yeah, and also, even if they are close, an incentive to have them not drive their car, because some people will literally drive their car a block to work. So that's another way to get at it, right?
Yeah. All right, guys, I want to be respectful of everyone's time on a Friday afternoon. Great meeting. Thank you all so much. We'll get some further follow-up out on homework around sending some funding ideas, funding sources in, and we'll get an agenda put together based on what you guys told us you want to talk about next time. Thank you so much. Everybody have a great weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you. You too.
Thank you.